Welcome back again to the second part of our social contract tradition, in which we're looking at based on some concepts that were requested by some individuals to go over. Um, in the part B of this, we're looking to talk about teleological thinking. We're going to compare that's Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau. We're going to espouse their concept of state of nature, law in terms of property, equal rights, and then the social contract itself. What they say or what they think individually as these scholars, and what they agree on, and what they disagree on. And then when we're also going to look at what conviviality and its keyword element in this particular slice. But there'll be a third part that will look at Locke, the fourth part to look at Rousseau, and then conviviality also. So pay attention and then look out for those videos and also subscribe and then leave your comments. Thank you very much. As we're moving on, we're looking at teleological thinking. This particular diagram you have here, what I would want us to ponder over or deal with is that why do we need or why do we even have a state, or why is there a need for a state? Because we only ask ourselves that what is the ultimate goal of government? Is it security, property, or equality? This is the idea of what of teleological. It is to help us in looking at the purpose and then the end goal of something. So if we say, why do we even need a state? Or so we're looking at the end goal of the state. We're looking at the end goal of a government. What is the end goal of government? So this is it. So when you look at this particular arrow I'm showing over here, I'm looking at more like showing an end goal of what Hobbes is looking at. He's looking at it from the security point of view. Locke is looking at it from liberty and property. Rousseau is looking at it from what? Equality and freedom. We'll espouse all this further and then explain, but that's more like the end goal of this. That's what it seeks to let us understand. That is what it seeks to connote and give us meaning to. So we'll say that it is a thinking in political theory that asks, what is the end of the state? What is the end of the state? So you realize that different thinkers ask this differently. And this is the reason why, this explains why there are versions of the social contract that we have. So for you to appreciate why, fine, more like there are versions of social contracts by maybe Thomas Hobbes, J.J. Rousseau, and then J.J. Rousseau, and then John Locke. You're going to appreciate this, that okay, fine, from the from from the theological point of view or thinking, from the theological thinking, you realize that it is for what? Looking at an end to something, right? And the end to what we are looking at over here, you realize that these thinkers that we are going to look at, their goal, as in Hobbes, has to do with what? Security. So it comes to the state, because looking at how is it come, Hobbes is looking at security. Locke look at it from liberty and property. Rousseau looks at a state from what? Equality and freedom. So this is what is to shape our thinking, is to shape our mindset, as in what is the goal of the state. This is what the thinkers ask, and then you realize that this is where they arrive at, and then we will look at that and explain all that in detail. The first scholar we're going to deal with is Thomas Hobbes, which I know you've heard a lot about. So Thomas Hobbes lived between the 1588 to 1679, right? He was born in England in 1588, the year of the Spanish Amanda invasion. So Hobbes himself later said that fear was his twin. So the reason why the background of Thomas Hobbes is important for you to understand this is that it will make you understand why all these scholars speak the way they speak, why they wrote the way they wrote. Because it looks like they are all being influenced by their background. They are all being influenced by what happened around them. Are you getting me? So you realize that the society you emanated from, the environment in which you found yourself, the happenings within that particular moment, what you experience within that social milieu in which you find yourself, one way or the other is more like has an impact on you or in shaping you. So you realize that their thoughts were shaped by the happenings in which they find or the social milieu in which they find themselves in. So he says that fear was his twin because since his mother went into like premature labor out of fear of what invasion. So you realize that his theme of fear and security runs through like that theme of that fear and security, or his theme that is fear and security runs through all his writings or his philosophy. That should tell you where he's coming from because of the background, what he's experienced, the social milieu in which he finds himself, the era. And then he studied at Oxford University, where he was training in classics and then on philosophy. He became a brilliant translator and then wrote on politics, history, and science. Yeah, and then he lived during the English Civil War, which is very important, which is an era of violent struggle between the king and parliament. So this gives you perspective of what we are about to do. Put that in mind. That he lives in the what English Civil War. Are you getting me? So if you put it in that order, you realize that yes, okay, maybe this is why he thinks this way. This is why he's writing this way. So put that at the back of your mind. So he saw society. It was at a time when he saw society has collapsed into bloodshed and instability. So this particular era in which he found himself convinced him that without strong government, life would what? Descend into what? Into chaos. So you realize that this era in which he finds himself will shape his thought as and when we begin to explain his thinking. You come to understand and appreciate a lot of things. And then major works is that his famous book, which the Leviathan, which was in the 1651, and then he also within that the Leviathan, he argued for what a powerful sovereign, which is a king or authority to keep the society peaceful and what and then secure. That's what he argued in that particular book. I was trying to see if I could get the book, but a cover image of the book, but I'm not getting it. But the cover image of the book um, shows a famous uh, giant ruler made up of thousands of small people around him, which is it was symbolic because it was symbolizing the sovereign power that comes from the people. Yeah, and then uh, later in his life, he was deemed by some people as controversial because his thought or his writings on the fact that there should be support for absolute monarchy. Some deem it to be what? To be dangerous. Yeah, some deemed it to be dangerous in that particular era in which, but we will come to appreciate this idea of Hobbes as we carry on. So this is basically about Thomas Hobbes. Are you getting me? And then as a student, we realize that, or as a thinker or as a researcher, you realize that if you want to understand Hobbes better, realize that his idea will make sense to you if you see it from the world view, or you live in an era where you've experienced war, violence, and civil war, like conflict and all those things. Because one thing you should put in mind was he was not just writing abstract theory. He was basically responding to the fear and instability of his time. I hope you're getting me. And that also makes you appreciate that his life story as a person shows why he valued what security over liberty and the time he finds himself. So that's what I'm trying to say, that having to understand the social milieu in which Thomas Hobbes finds himself and his environment will make you appreciate where he's coming from in terms of his writing of a social contract. Let's delve into what Thomas Hobbes has for us in terms of the state of nature and the social contract. So you see this image on my left side where you see anarchy, chaos, where you see people on the field trying to kill each other. Yes. So this sends a signal to you, tells you what Hobbes is trying, picture that Thomas Hobbes is trying to paint you as. Because this is how Hobbes imagined that without a government, there's going to be constant fighting, there's going to be fear, there's going to be what? Insecurity. Because in the view of Thomas Hobbes, he believed that we human beings are selfish in the sense that we pursue our own what? Survival and advantage. We are fearful, we are afraid of what others may harm us. Like we have that fear. And we are competitive. We fight for what? For resources, for safety, and then honor. Because so in the layman's language, or in simple terms, what Thomas Hobbes is trying to argue or make us understand is that human beings are not angels. We are driven by what? Survival, fear, and power. So defining Hobbes' state of nature, he described the state of nature as a war of all against all. A condition where no law, no authority, and no rules. So people cannot trust one another. So conflict is everywhere, it's constant. So that's the state of nature that Thomas Hobbes is talking about. So the state of nature he's talking about is like what is existing, what the state of the state used to be, or what it is, without any social contract. What does the state look like? That is what he's describing. Because he's talking about the fact that the state of nature is a period where people cannot trust one another. Is a condition where there's no law, no authority, no rule. And this is his famous quote in describing the state of nature, where he says that life in the state of nature is what? Solitary, it's poor, it's nasty, it's brutish, and it's short. But people die untimely through battle, through wars. It is nasty, it is brutish, it is poor. So these are the terminologies in which he uses to describe the state of nature. So having to understand this with the perspective of a state of nature, it is from the image of that English Civil War of the 1640s, which shaped Thomas Hobbes' thinking, because that was an era where he found himself that was chaotic, it was characterized by lawlessness and bloodshed. In contemporary times, that you can describe maybe a state of nature, maybe in fine way in Africa, maybe the likes of the Sierra Leone, Liberia, that civil war where you had society being solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, where ordinary people were practically living in fear, and survival was the only way to go. But one thing I want you to understand, as Thomas Hobbes is explaining the state of nature, you have to understand very well is that Hobbes does not mean human beings are evil. He means without a common authority, our natural fear, selfishness, and then what? Competition will produce chaos. That's what he's trying to say. That's what he's trying to say. That's the emphasis of what he's trying to tell us out of the state of nature. So you see Thomas Hobbes' book, The Leviathan, on my right. This is Thomas Hobbes, one of Thomas Hobbes' most famous books, which was in 1651. So the Leviathan is a metaphor for the sovereign, a giant ruler made up of what the people. So that is what. So the Leviathan is more talking about the ruler. It's what why then there's a need for that. So we are now going to go to the, because he talks about people giving up their natural freedom to an absolute what sovereign, which is the Leviathan, very powerful above all. Because he says that the sovereign must be what powerful enough to enforce what peace. So taking it, let's take it one after the other from the the key idea of Thomas Hobbes when it comes to the social contract. So when it comes to the social contract, what's the key idea of Thomas Hobbes? He says people give up natural freedom, so the right to do anything for survival. So people are giving up their natural freedom. That's one thing. So they transfer their authority toward a sovereign power, which is the Leviathan we're talking about. So people, for example, in a classroom setting, people may decide, okay, we've given our right, our everything to maybe one person who may be a course rep who has the power to decide where we're going to have lectures, going to talk the lecture and all those things. In a small setting. But in this instance, he's trying to say that we've given our rights, or we are giving what up what our natural freedom, which is the right to life and all those things. Speak, we are giving that natural freedom to one what absolute what sovereign. And that sovereign, because if we are giving him his right, is meant to protect us. So let's take one after the other. So people give up what their natural freedom, which is the right to do what anything for survival. And then they transfer that authority to a sovereign power, which is what then the sovereign power is what you're referring to as a Leviathan. So the sovereign must be what absolute and powerful enough to enforce what the peace, otherwise chaos will return. That's what he means. That's why he advocates for what monarchy, because he speaks of the fact that the sovereign should be powerful, not restricted, and the fact that morality and the law are not natural. They come from agreement, rules, and what? And enforcement. So in this instance, what he's trying to say that we citizens or citizens will trade their freedom for what? For protection and order. Because, for example, you find in the dispensation of Ghana, using Ghana as a case study, realize that people in this country will actually what? Or citizens in this country will pay tax, they obey law, and accept what? Punishment. In return, the state is supposed to provide what? Police protection, national defense, and legal order. The same way people in the United States are going to pay tax, they are obeying the law, they are accepting punishment. But in return of all that, these particular rights or the freedom they've given out to the sovereign, they expect in return what? The protection of the police protection. They expect what? National defense against external threats or even internal threats. They also expect what? Legal a legal what? Order. So if taking Somalia in the 1990s, where we deemed to say Somalia was more like a failed state. There was no government. There are a lot of factions or small piece of government. That's the thing. So it leads to what? Chaos. So Hobbes will use that by saying that this is the reason why people need what? A Leviathan. So this is at the backdrop of what? Thomas Hobbes what? Social contract. We are giving up our right to a sovereign power, the Leviathan, very powerful enough to make sure that some of these things does not happen. That as we are giving our, He will protect us. He will give us security and all those things. So this is an image seeking to show us what Hope is telling us. So on the left, you see what? Chaos. On the right, you see what? Order. Because Hobbes believed that this is the choice human beings are facing, or this is a choice that humanity face. Either live in anarchy or create authority to maintain what? Peace. And the authority to maintain peace is a social contract, giving out your rights and freedom to a sovereign to be able to what? Offer you that protection, that peace, that order. That's what Thomas Hobbes is saying. So in that instance, if you're able to achieve that, we've left that state of nature he described toward an order, an orderly what? System. So under Thomas Hobbes' system, I would want to use the concept of the prisoner dilemma for you to understand that. So I'm going to use those two students to explain that. On my right is Josephine, on my left is Faris. So I'm going to use them in terms of the prisoner dilemma to explain it for you to get the concept of what, or the input of what, Thomas Hobbes is trying to what across. So I'm going to introduce this and make it more like in a story form in the prisoner dilemma to make it easier. So the story over here is going to be about Josephine and then what? Faris, right? So let's all imagine that Josephine and Faris are arrested for crime, right? And then the police does not have enough evidence, so they separate them and offer each a deal. So they send, because Josephine has been arrested, Faris has been arrested for a crime that they were engaged in. So these people went out to, maybe it's robbery or something. Let's put it that way. So Faris is sent into interrogation room A, then Josephine is sent into interrogation room B, right? We're going to use that scenario to explain the input of this. So this is just like a thought experiment in political theory, where, as I just mentioned, we call it the prison dilemma for you to understand something. So there's what? The cooperate or stay silent. So I'm explaining the two possibilities. So the two choices available, the choices. So let's take the first choice. The first choice is what? Cooperate, stay silent. That's the first choice. So if both Josephine and Faris stay silent, they each get a lighter sentence of 2 years each. This will be more like the best outcome. For instance, the police may not have enough evidence against Faris and then Josephine, so they make the best outcome is they're having without 2 years sentence, 2 year sentence, right? But the fear of betray over here, that's the second one we're looking at. If Josephine betrays, but Faris stays silent, Josephine goes free with 0 years. Josephine will not get anything. You should go short free, 0 years. Faris will get the 3 years, right? If Faris betrays, but Josephine stays silent, Faris will go free, but Josephine will get what? 3 years. And then the third one, if both betray, they each will get that particular what? 1 year, and even hefty than what was intended. I hope you are getting. You see, they'll get a 1 year, which will be a heavier and then a heavier sentence. 1 year worse than cooperating, right? So what this show, or what this dilemma shows over here, this is the input of what you're trying to, so come back to understand what we show, or the input of what you want this dilemma to imply, or to make you understand better. Even though both would be better off staying silent or not talking at all, the temptation to betray is stronger because each fear that being will be or the loser. So maybe Faris being in that integration room A, and then Josephine being that integration room B, they'll be pondering, like, if this guy go down, I'll lose, right? So rationally, self-interest will push both towards what? Betrayal. Even though cooperation will give what? The best outcome, that self-interest will push both of them, push both Fares and then Josephine toward betrayal. So this is what the core what problem of cooperation in politics and society. So linking this is the most important part. Listen, linking this to Hobbes. Hobbes used this logic to argue why we need a sovereign authority, which is the Leviathan. Because without a strong word enforcer, people cannot trust each other and cooperation will break down. This is the input of what we are trying to pass across. That Hobbes used this particular prison dilemma to say that using this particular logic, he argues or he's saying that we need a sovereign authority, a Leviathan, a strong somebody whose power is supreme. Because without that strong enforcer, people cannot trust each other and and cooperation will break down. Because somebody will think, okay, will he not break the law? This contract that we signed, this social contract that we signed, that will you not attack me or not attack you, will she not break it? Will she honor it? But if there is a strong sovereign authority, and they know that that strong sovereign authority can also enforce that, what did they do? You find them at peace. That's what the input of what Thomas Hobbes is trying to make us understand. So you ask yourself the question: if you were Josephine or a Pharis, would you stay silent or betray? I guess it's a question I leave for you guys to ponder over. We've gone through that of John Locke, Thomas Hobbes. We've gone through Thomas Hobbes. So what we're going to look now, and we've done the teleological. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to pause here. Then we're going to continue with John Locke, and then Rousseau's concept of social contract, and then the others. So this is going to be RB, and then we're going to have the subsequent one. Thank you very much for taking time to listen. Please don't forget to subscribe and then comment.